Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next BBC Sherlock episode review. This is going to be for Season 3, Episode 2, The Sign of 3. Second episode, obviously, of the season, middle episode. Only one left. Really is a short season, only like 6 days left pretty much at this point in Season 3 after waiting so long. But this episode, The Sign of 3, was I did really enjoy it. It was a really funny episode, very character focused, which I appreciated. Um, didn't quite have the level of plot maybe I would have would expect from other episodes of the show, especially season 1 and 2 stuff. But I think this one especially just suffers from a little bit of the whole episode 2 syndrome that I've kind of talked about a little bit in my season 1 and 2 combined review from like a week ago. Just that they tend to do something unique, a little bit risky with the second episode in each season. The blind banker took things in a different direction, introducing a lot of new characters to kind of keep the plot going. The Hounds of Baskerville went to a whole new place while also introducing new characters. In this one, they just went for one an interesting format of the whole episode being based around Sherlock's best man speech at the wedding, and then doing flashbacks, have the all these flashbacks linked together eventually to give the solution to the thing at the end. But it mainly being a character focused episode and the plot not having too much like emotional impact on things. So it kind of made the episode feel like it was this super character focused episode where they felt like they had to introduce some form of mystery into it, just so it's a Sherlock episode, you have to have mystery in it. So I was left kind of wondering, like, why didn't they just go all out character stuff and not have so much action in it? Or why didn't they level it out, have half be character, half be the other one? The way they have it now is just kind of like, okay, they didn't quite go all in on the character stuff, and then they didn't go in enough into the plot stuff. But I'll get into some of the specifics on the episode. It was actually a really good episode, and I outside of just like it not being the most solid episode, I don't really have too many complaints. Opening of this episode is interesting with the we see Sally Donovan again, seeing her and Lestrade trying to catch these criminals who keep getting away, getting kind of found innocent apparently, not enough evidence, and then eventually through Lestrade's moment of brilliance, apparently that's what I think Sally says, they actually have them cornered, like caught in the act, and then Sherlock calls him, and we get the whole thing of Sherlock's really, really nervous about this best man wedding speech, and I found it an interesting opening to the episode. One, because I kind of expected the criminals from the start of the episode to play a role in the rest of it, but it was just this funny way to set up the fact that he's nervous for it. That's it. I did enjoy the fact that the episode was really centered around this speech, and they gave a lot of time to that one speech. Like, I didn't count how many minutes it was, but I'd say it was probably about 20 minutes of just Benedict Cumberbatch in that kind of same scene, like him standing beside John and Mary and the bridesmaid, just talking to that room. It was they could have away from it a good few times, but it made up a good amount of the episode. So I'm glad they gave it time because it was really interesting, kind of character focus on Sherlock. Just seeing like through the flashbacks, like how nervous he was about this, how emotional it was for him to find out that John really does consider him his best friend. He chose him to be his best man. He wants him to give the speech. And then the whole kind of theme of the episode will be around change. They constantly reference, end of an era. Things are going to change when you get married, even though Sherlock, Mary, and John all say that kind of like it's just a wedding. It's not too big of a deal, but especially by the end of the episode, you're just kind of wondering, are things going to change that badly? The way he walks out of the wedding, but I'll talk about that later on. The speech initially just really focuses just on how important John is to Sherlock and how important Sherlock is to John, just through what it kind of explains and stuff like that. we get some other nice moments. I'm just kind of going through the episode in chronological order. Took some notes. Um, the scene with Sherlock and David, I thought that was kind of just this brilliant moment of not just the fact that he likes Mary, but he's actively trying to like help this marriage kind of work by getting any kind of kind of thing that could come between them out of the way. So he kind of scares this guy David. He's just like I'm just a friend who has a number, and he just does this really creepy smile. It's brilliant. Then we get the little scene with Mycroft. He's not at the wedding. We see he's kind of working out, which is a reference to the fact that I think Sherlock kind of been teasing him in earlier episodes about that, and I think that's a reference to the other Mycroft characters in other iterations of Sherlock. And just seeing that, like was referenced in the last episode, he's in a way even worse socially than Sherlock. He doesn't even go to the wedding while Sherlock is going. He's the best man. Back to the speech, kind of cuts back to it. I think the big thing that the speech does is, I think John, Mary, Molly Lestrade, and like some of those people, they know that like once you kind of get past the kind of initial exterior of Sherlock, that he is kind of reasonably nice. He's kind of hard to be around sometimes. This speech really showed that to everyone in that room, just that yes, he's awkward socially, yes, he's different to everyone else, but he's not too different from everyone else in that sort of way, in that he has a best friend like a lot of people do, and all this other stuff. It was really interesting just seeing him talk about this emotional stuff, and obviously what made it unique was the fact that everyone else gets emotional, but when he was saying it, he's not getting overly emotional. Then when he sees everyone crying, he's just like, what's happening? I'm about to go into the funny moments, and it's just he's funny in a kind of unique way, and I think everyone kind of understands through this speech kind of why John is his best friend. It does a really good job of kind of portraying his character. It's interesting. We get him praising John. This episode has a lot of praise about John. Talking about how brave he is, how wise he is, which obviously is a reference to John saying that Sherlock was the wisest, best person he's ever met. That was interesting. But from there it's just interesting. We're also introduced to John's friend, who's like Major Sholto, and this is the setup for the plot. And I think this is the weakest aspect of the episode. In that, the reason I say it's weak is because the villain is just a kind of non-event as a character. It's the kind of Scooby-Doo-esque type thing that you often have a problem with in Scooby-Doo episodes, and that they go so far out of the way to make it so that you can't work out who actually did it during the episode, that when it's actually revealed, you don't actually care who the villain is, because they were so minor as a character in the episode. And that's the case here, in that it's a similar case in terms of the eventual reveal of the job of the person. It's a person who, because of their job, goes unnoticed by most normal people. It's a reference to A Study in Pink and Jeff Hope, the cab driver from the first episode, who was the villain criminal in that one. The difference is that he became an interesting character because they gave him time after the reveal of the fact that he was the villain. He had that great one-on-one thing with Sherlock where he was kind of outsmarting him, and that's what made him you actually kind of care about him as a villain. Not care, but actually find him a threat. With this guy, it was just the photographer who we saw for like a second at the start of the episode, and then for like 30 seconds when he was revealed to be the villain, and then he just kind of reverts to being Mr. Villain, saying, you should be the one that's arrested, and that just makes for a kind of weak plot. As much as there was a lot of interesting kind of reveals in the plot, that it linked together the two cases of the Bloody Guardsman and the Mayfly Man. It just came to a conclusion in a kind of unsatisfying way, even though it kind of happened at the right moment. I just, they kind of needed to make that photographer more of a character, And then even Sholto, they didn't even give him too much time. Just like he's one of John's kind of army friends, and they expected to really care about him, and it just was a little bit weak. The whole idea of the like a small blade going through one of these thick belts that's really tight, as being a way of killing someone, was interesting. I felt they could have explained it a bit better. They were very kind of careful about not showing you too much about what was going on, and so it left it kind of confusing as to what was actually what the whole aim was. Like, you never fully saw what exactly the blade was. The only real visual of a blade we get is the guy pulling the thing out of the wedding feast or something like that. It could have been done a lot better, but there was some clever stuff in the whole deductions, how it came about. But yeah, we get some other stuff in this episode about Sherlock kind of being like John and Mary's kid, and then this is kind of giving them some level of experience because they are going to have a kid. That was interesting, especially that scene where Mary kind of manipulates both John and Sherlock to kind of get them out of her hair during the planning of the wedding, in that she makes them both think that they're kind of helping the other one out. You know, she makes Sherlock believe that he's bringing John out, and then she makes John believe that he's bringing Sherlock out, and she's just like there that to both of them on both sides of the divide. It was a really nice scene to kind of get her over more as a character, Mary, who, like the last episode, wasn't the main character, but you got these nice moments of her just interacting well with the rest of them, and just her. I suppose she has Sherlock's respect, I think, is interesting in itself. We got a little bit on Tom. I'm just going through my notes really randomly, but a little bit about Tom. He got a line, meat dagger, that was pretty hilarious. But yeah, biscuits, that was a nice line in the episode. Just him trying to stop Mrs. Hudson from telling one of her stories. The stag night was interesting in that it was interesting to see both John and especially Sherlock drunk. The whole idea of him using graduated cylinders and kind of planning the whole thing out really scientifically was kind of brilliant, in that he's like, okay, Molly, calculate the right amount of alcohol to make us kind of get the good part of being drunk without feeling really bad. And eventually John, spikes their drinks and they both actually get drunk. It was interesting. We get the kind of dubstep version of the Sherlock theme, which was nice. I felt the scene did go on a bit too long. The whole, I suppose it wasn't a sequence of scenes of them being drunk. I did think it went on a little bit too long, in that they were just like, okay, they're drunk, let's spend like 7 minutes or so focusing on this. And there was some nice stuff, but again, I felt it was a little bit kind of too much, and they were kind of having maybe too much fun when it wasn't as big as you kind of expected it to be. But just stuff like the way Sherlock usually reads things in the room. He's like looks at a chair and he's just like, instead of analyzing it, he's just like city thing. Speakers just like speak thing, and all this other stuff. There's a lot of question marks come out. It's just interesting to see Sherlock drunk reading something, reading a room. And that was the whole Mayfly man. Why can't I say that properly? But Mayfly man case, which again was interesting. They did a really weird way in how they brought all the cases together. They made them super separate, and then they came together during the speech, and you have that be the kind of part two of Sherlock's speech. He brings a little bit of action into his speech. It was. I liked the episode once it kind of got into this kind of role. It maybe took a bit too long to actually get in there, because I thought the whole scenes actually worked reasonably well when there was a little bit of action going on in the wedding. Again, it just didn't quite have the impact because the criminal in the end wasn't anything overly special. We got the reference to Vatican cameos. He says that again. We saw Irene Adler appear in Sherlock's Mind Palace, showing that he does still think about her sometimes. That's not one of the things he forgets about, I suppose. He talks about needing to forget a lot of things, like the room number of Sholto's room, but he doesn't forget about her, which is interesting in itself. Then just coming towards the end of my notes, he's the one to play the violin for the newlywed couple's dance, John and Mary's dance. And then we see him leave alone, putting the music that he composed for them into a letter, and before that he makes the vow that he's always going to be there for the three of them, John, Mary, and the reveal that Mary's pregnant and stuff like that, so they're going to have a kid. That was interesting to see where exactly they're going with that. Obviously, the last episode is called His Last Vow. Sherlock's vow is that he'll always be there for that family now. So what's going to happen there? Interesting that only Molly is the one to notice that Sherlock actually leaves the wedding. She's the only one who looks at as he goes by. So maybe they're setting up something there. Going through the rest of my notes, only other thing I have there is that as of now we've had very little reference to our villain going into the third episode, Magnuson. The first episode had the news report, a little thing going on the bottom, Magnuson attends Parliament or something like that. In this one we had one of the telegrams at the wedding was from Cam, which I think is the initials of the guy Charles Augustus, I think, Magnuson. So Mary obviously reacts to that, and I think John asks, "Are you okay?" and she looks worried. So again, setting up the connection between something going on with Mary and Magnuson somewhere, but we'll see where that goes. As I said, good episode. Not the best episode of Sherlock, but I think it had some really, really good character moments. That sequence of scenes with Sherlock's wedding speech was really good. I think I really enjoyed, especially the moment where he gives the kind of more emotional part of it, and then is kind of trying to go into the funny stories, but it doesn't quite work. John hugs Sherlock because he found it emotional, and just everyone being kind of shocked that this speech, which started off like a train wreck, eventually ending in something kind of so kind of emotional and powerful. It was well done. They like taking risks with these second episodes, which works in other series like Avatar: The Last Airbender. Sorry if any Sherlock fans out there haven't even watched the series, but my channel is primarily Avatar focused, so I think it's one of the comparisons I can bring in. Book 2 Earth is obviously 20 episodes, but the only time they really take a risk with the format is in episode 15 and 16, where 15 they have this kind of more mundane story in the Tales of Ba Sing Se, where it's just like a bunch of different stories focusing on one character as they go about their life in this new city that they've just entered. And then the one following that is a recap episode following Appa Aang's Bison. That's okay to do in like a 20 episode series, but when you take that sort of a risk and really kind of the middle episode of a season and kind of devote it to something so character focused, very little setup for the last episode, the villain, very little plot to it, it definitely kind of is something that marks the series down as like, you only have 3 episodes and you kind of take a risk on one of them. It's sometimes difficult to kind of ask like why would they do that, and that's my only worry going into the last episode, is that it's going to have to do a lot because the Sign of Three didn't specifically set up an incredible amount. I'm assuming that the last episode is going to be very character focused as well. I'm assuming Mary, the whole like basically family of John, Mary, Sherlock, and whatever they do about the pregnancy, that's going to be a big plot point, character point going into the next episode with our new villain Magnuson. But I just hope they manage to kind of end it well, simply because it's been a long wait for these episodes, and for like maybe this episode to kind of limit what the other one can do would be a negative. But as I said, on the whole, really funny episode, and I think once the season's over, my opinion on this episode will definitely go way up. I'm already really positive on it, but definitely kind of suffers a little bit from that episode 2 syndrome that I've talked about. But lots of great character moments. I'm going to end it here before I start repeating myself. I've already kind of done that, but yeah, I'm going to end it here. So thanks for watching this review, and bye.